Hey everybody, Pinstripe here, welcome back to some more Hogs. Tonight bringing you another scrim up against Mr. Zarin once more here on Coldfront. And lineups wise they are mixed once more, missing the medics, but coming out with the Gren, Scout, Para and Double Gunner on my side. Whereas Mr. Zarin bringing the Gren, Para, Sapper, Scout, Para, so double Paras and double Gunners on either side. As for this video itself though, today I want to be talking a little bit about complacency in competitive Hogs, because we've all kind of been there where you're very much in the driving seat of a match, but just kind of being able to keep your composure and deal the necessary damage to perform the necessary tasks placed before you and making sure that you get the job done, right? It's pretty straightforward. But I do just quickly want to draw your attention to this next turn, bearing in mind that I destroyed this Grenadier with a decent cluster and got full damage, but Mr. Zarin is going to come back at me with the same, but he deals the full 105 HP's worth of damage. You'll see that I am on 120, but all you'll see here is 15s across the board. It is 10s across the board from all the judges, and my Grenadier is down to 15 HP, which is maybe not the best thing, I guess, because it requires you then to use a jetpack to use that to take him down before then doing anything else in your turn. But as with everything on Coldfront, nowhere on this map is safe from you sliding down into oblivion. There is, of course, a few buildings. You've got one in front of me where the house is. Within that, you'll find both rocket launcher and homing missile crates. And then there are two smaller buildings on either side on the low ground. One, of course, on the minimap you can observe contains the health crate. And then on the opposite side, one contains the medical darts, which I collected with my scout. So already holding those, I am in an advantage to kind of keep them in my back pocket for when it is absolutely necessary. As it is with the medical darts, you know, you're taking that turn to shoot at a dude in that of a friendly pig, obviously, to heal him for 40 HP, which is not ideal, because, you know, you'd much prefer the use of, like, healing hands in order to continue your turn. But here, again, Mr. Zarin ensuring that he gets the kill on my Grenadier. He is taken down, but he did his job. He did what was needed, so I allow him to perish before then finally collecting the health crate, because you know my policy on health crates, right? You need to be collecting them as soon as possible, but my focus on that first turn was, of course, finding the enemy Grenadier and then dealing damage onto him and kind of, not quite baiting, but just keeping your enemy focused on you and less so on the things that are on the map. Of course, for most pro players, the healing items on this map are going to be first come, first serve. So despite me inflicting damage onto quite a few of these pigs initially, I mean the scout here taking hefty chunks of damage, but I am aware, of course, of the self-heal crate, which I'll be coming to later. So let's talk about complacency in Hogs then. The obvious, I guess, starting point for this topic is when you are bringing the stronger lineup. On paper, you could argue that Zarin is bringing the slightly stronger lineup, be it with a scout slightly lower in the order compared to me. I mean, my setup normally puts a scout either second or third. If I'm not bringing a medic, I will move him up, I'll bump him up, but normally I will have a para going second. But on this case, Gren, scout, then para, and then the two gunners. The two gunners I kind of use as my lackeys. They're usually either damage sponges or guys that have assigned tasks. In that of like head jumping later on, trying to get some poisons in as well, and using the mortar in combination with some decent positioning, as you'll see here with my first gunner. Now the instinct, of course, is to bring out the mortar, but as I've learned over the years, you need to go with the weapon that you're feeling a bit more confident on when you are at a long distance. So I'm kind of gathering my range here, so I do overshoot, I do deal some damage onto the scout, but I have now ensured that in the back of my brain I know how much power is necessary to shoot down onto the low ground, you know? But the scout is going to take up residence in the smaller building and poison me, so of course with no healing left, I am going to be dealing with a lot of poisons. In fact, both players are throughout this game, so poison management, both giving and taking, is kind of key. But you'll notice as well, like I say, my gunners are going to be doing the dirty work of getting in the head jumps, because bearing in mind that the Grenadier is still alive, but he is on 11 HP. All I need is the single head jump, and even though that means that he is just an easy target for one of Zaren's paratroopers, bearing in mind that it will be the para next, it puts the focus on that Grenadier and makes it so that that kind of has to be Zaren's next target. But speaking of targets, like I say, my range is well and truly where it needs to be. I knew the angle necessary and got exactly 39 HP's worth of damage. So yeah, doing pretty well there. But as expected, the target now for Zaren to not skip the turn is to take out his own Gren, which takes up a lot of time. And as I mentioned, Coldfront is not kind when it comes to slippery tiles and where you end up if you do end up slipping. I think this is one of the first times on Coldfront that I did not bring a sapper. I've only played it a few times, even though this is a scrim. When it comes to actual competitive pro games, they have been few and far between. But sappers tend to be not prioritized, but they're usually included in the mix. And that is very much the case for Zaren with his sapper going third. Meanwhile, I am purely relying on my heavy weapons to deal that damage. And bring those mortars home, which are somewhat lackluster in this game, but taking advantage of the positioning of both of these paras. I'm not too fond on the grouping up though, like I've spoken about distance being key in a lot of videos. I mean, we are on the high ground, so that is the frontal advantage, but there are still crates that can be collected. Thankfully for me, though, Zaren was not in the right area to collect the self-heal crate that is to the left where he is pointing at the moment, over by the other tree, so he was not aware that the self-heal was there, but I'm going to be keeping that for later as he will eventually be knocking me down with this heavy machine gun. So the heavy goes down, but generally, as you can tell, I'm not too bothered, and that is where the first stages of complacency can creep in, when you know you are dictating and controlling the game, but in actually inflicting damage and keeping that damage output is just something that you have to be aware of the entire time. You know, if you end up losing a turn or taking a turn that just doesn't do what it's needed to do, then you are putting yourself at a disadvantage and allowing your opponent to creep back into the match. You'll see here I'm taking a turn to heal myself and finally collecting said self-heal and ensuring that my para is bumped back up to 116, utilizing every second available. And I knew at the start of this turn that I wasn't going to have time to do anything else, but my prime directive in that moment was to get there, to collect it, and to use it straight off, to bump him back up, to remove the poison, and put the pressure back onto Zaren. Because bearing in mind that he still has this full HP sapper who hasn't taken any damage yet, and compared to my gunners, you know, the sapper at mid to close range is incredibly deadly, especially when he decides to collect a rocket launcher crate. Leaves the homing missiles though, he's too cool for those, I guess. But I do get a bit lucky in a slight overshot from said sapper, but you can see where the main targets lie with Zaren's pigs, in that the sapper becomes target number 1, because the paras are basically taken care of, seeing as they are poisoned, so I can allow them to just lose health slowly over time and start inflicting damage onto said sapper. Of course, I am looking for the skip as well, so that doesn't mean I'm going to completely ignore the paratroopers, but even so. I am still in the same boat as a lot of people, whereby if you end up bringing the pairing of the gunners, then it can be difficult to use them effectively, especially when it is this kind of like close quarters combat. You know, you're not going to be using a pistol. Flamethrower is only handy if you're on the low ground and can push pigs off the map, you know, trying to get out of bounds, hitting that boundary wall and exploding, but those are very, very rare circumstances. The damage output for a gunner per turn has to be high 30s up to 50. If it's anything lower than that, maybe like 34, 35 is still okay, but anything lower than that, like 34 and below, is a bit iffy. You know, you need to be maintaining that high damage output with both gunners too, like within 2 turns. Like absolute maximum, like really good turn, you can be dealing 100 HP's worth of damage in those 2 turns, not counting splash damage from the extra shells from said mortar. I mean, failing that, A nice 80 is always good. And I mean, if the flamethrower trick was technically in competitive, then you could technically deal 204 HP's worth of damage in 2 turns, which is terrifying, but more so, I suppose, for vehicles than anything else. But as you can see, I'm still not exempt from these slippery tiles, trying to get a decent defensive position, but this is what I was saying about my mortars being somewhat lackluster. The first one was 39 HP, and then this one is direct, but we get no additional splash damage, which means that, okay, he does take 60, given that he is poisoned, and he is down to 7, so Pin, stop complaining, you dealt the damage, stop being so harsh on yourself. I don't know, either way. Complacency, like I say, is creeping in for me at this point. You wouldn't think it, but you can certainly feel it as this game goes on, because the door widens for Zaren to get a foot back in, but I maintain this sort of calm-ish composure because I am still very much aware of the fact that I'm holding on to healing items. I still have those medical darts, which are there as a last resort should I need them. So I'm holding off of them so far. It's like eating a cake, you know. I'm just gonna wait until evening time, and then maybe I'll have some. But until I really need to, I'm just gonna keep it in the fridge or wherever the hell it is in the cake tin. I don't know. What do people use these days? What do you put your cakes in? Let me know in the comments. And this is where the big mistake comes in, as I effectively gift Zaren a free skip turn after poisoning my gunner, seeing as he is not exactly the healthiest. Especially when there is a TNT coming his way, and fair play to Zaren, he ensures that body blocks are on the cards, which makes it trickier for me in the long run. But yeah, it is possible to just hit the single target when pigs are nose to nose like that, but you have to be incredibly accurate with the throw, and on that occasion I was not. And this is effectively going to be the end of the gunner, because a cattle prod will end his life effectively and gain that skip turn. And again, if I was not holding onto those healing items, it would be a massive letdown for me and a massive door to open for my opponent to come back into this game. So rather than making life harder for myself, I decide to go and collect said homing missiles, seeing as nobody wants them. I have found a home for them, and they will be in the face of Zaren's paratrooper, because yes, I have a bazooka that can deal the same amount of damage, but you aren't guaranteed to deal max damage, unlike the homing missile, which will land smack bang on your target so long as there is no terrain or anything blocking its way. I mean, of course, sometimes homing missiles like to do a wee bit of a spin, but that is if they are missing and overshooting, and that is usually tied to how much power that you apply to it. So if you give it too much, it is more likely to fly over the head of the pig and have to circle back around again. So if you're at that kind of distance, keep it short and keep it simple. But as I say, my gunner is indeed going to fall. That is the primary example, I guess, of that complacency of just, I'll just randomly try and hit this shot with this poison gas, and it provides the perfect turn. Of course, I did get said poison on the sapper, so at least he is finally taking damage, but he is going to be continuing to deal that damage onto my pigs, and my para, thankfully, having healed earlier, he would have been on, I think, 56 by this point, so he would have been within skippable range, but Zaren keeps things complicated and ensures that the body blocks are maintained as well, given that my scout will be taking his turn fairly soon, but not before my gunner has anything to say about it, given that the other para is on 55 HP and is poisoned. Sadly for me though, that means that I will have to rely on a mortar shot to deal the damage, and I don't. I just go for the heavy machine gun, which again is example number 2 of that complacency, where I should really be looking for the skip here. The pro move is to just take the time to go for the mortar to gain the skip, but I don't know. I just sort of wanted this game to be over, I guess. I felt confident enough that I just had to deal the damage and not do anything else. But if this were a league game, that would have been a massive mistake, as Zaren is able to deal the 20 onto my gunner. He is then able to remove the skip entirely by just shooting the bazooka in the air, damaging us both and taking us out of the equation. And that then draws it down to a 2v1. The sapper is the only one left on Zaren's team, which means that I'm going to have the body blocks to contend with, which is always a tricky situation. But if the health pools are low enough, you don't necessarily have to care too much about the splash damage onto your own pigs. So long as you can maintain that damage, that is what is necessary. But then again, you do also have to factor in the type of class that is being brought here, because although the damage is dealt here and he drops down to 65 HP, he is then going to move over to my scout, do the same thing, maintain the body block, but I'm not going to care. I still hold that homing missile, so that's going to be the main buffer for me to deal that 40 damage, but you can kind of do the math for yourself here as the rocket launcher comes out, which will drop me to 66 HP. So you can see where a player that is perhaps more skilled with the shrapnel could have gained themselves a draw in this game, purely based on the mistakes that I made and the complacency that I had with a few of those shots. But overall, guys, that is going to wrap it up from me and indeed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. My scout is going to take a homing missile to the face down to 2 HP, which will be some easy head jumps. And yeah, I'm going to leave you with the rest of the gameplay. So let me know your thoughts on everything in the comments below. Do you have any areas of complacency that you tend to get hit with sometimes in league matches? Let me know everything in the comments, and I'll catch you guys later for the next one.
Destination goal.